is up, weather enthusiasts? I'm your host, Pat's Path Predictor. Let's get right into the weather. Alright, so here's the situation we have for you, ladies and gentlemen. We have quite a few things that we're going to be talking to you about today, starting with our new area of interest that was tagged last night in the Gulf again, and then we're going to be talking about the MDR because we have some new developments that we need to talk to you about and share with you, particularly with the ITCZ, with more tropical waves coming off and better chances for development. So with that being said, we're going to go ahead and dive right into it right here. So here's what we have starting off for you right here. This is our area of interest. Currently, it's located in North Florida. It's expected to enter the Gulf region, and the NHC does have this potentially going up right here, potentially developing right here. It gives it a 10% probability of development at this current point in time. We're going to go ahead and read through this, and then we'll kind of talk about this for a little bit. And then move on, but let's go ahead and get started. A trough of low pressure near northern Florida is producing very few showers and thunderstorms. Over the next day or two, the system is forecast to move west-southwestward into the north-central portion of the Gulf, where some slow development is possible. By this weekend, the system is likely to move inland, ending its chances for development. Regardless of tropical cyclone formation, locally heavy rainfall is expected for portions of Florida over the next day or so, and for the northern Gulf Coast through this weekend. 10% chance in the next 48 hours, 10% in the next 7 days. So that's something that you're going to want to pay attention to right there. But ultimately, it was a bit surprising the NHC did tag this last night. I did find this kind of interesting to say for the very least, kind of interesting that they decided to go and designate this an area of interest. I know hurricane hunters are forecast to go out in this right here. We can go ahead and take a quick look at this right here with aircraft reconnaissance. And we can go ahead and pull out what we have right here for tomorrow. Here's what we have for recon right here. They are expected to move in towards this area of interest and start reconnaissance tomorrow around 1800 UTC. That's about 1 o'clock in the afternoon Central Time, 2 o'clock Eastern Time. The flight, I believe, is going to be taking off about an hour before that, and ultimately, that's kind of the situation that we have. We're looking at low-level reconnaissance at this current point. Same with Flight 2. We're looking at two flights that potentially may go into this right here. So you're going to want to pay attention to that. We'll have to see if this gets designated an invest later or not. Maybe by the time you see this video, it's designated an invest, but we'll have to see what happens with that moving forward. Now we can go ahead and show you some satellite imagery. We'll go ahead and pull up the Gulf region just to kind of show you what we're looking at potentially with this right here. So the situation that we have is you have this low pressure area that's currently over North Florida, at least trying to move into the Gulf right here. It is moving west-southwest according to the NHC, and it will enter the Gulf in the next, I'd say, 12 to 18 hours or so. However, my main question with this is, and this is similar to 93L, and this is also a reason I'm kind of skeptical with some of the development probabilities with this, is how is this going to move into the Gulf, or how far away in the water is it going to move through? Because if it stays and just hugs along the coast like it did with 93L, I'm not going to see any chance of development. However, if it moves into the Gulf genuinely and actually get some distance and kind of goes where my cursor is going and moves in this pattern similar to what the NHC is advocating for, then I would go, okay, there might be a better shot for development. And that also depends on some of the conditions like the shear, the moisture component and all of that. I will be honest with you, I don't think the moisture is going to be as big of an issue this time, and I'll go ahead and show you why. So taking a quick look at this as this is starting to zero in and this is starting to refresh, you're noticing more and more of this convection that's kind of firing off in the northern Gulf off the coast of Louisiana. That's kind of bringing some outflow, and that's mixing a lot of the dry air out of the Gulf Coast, particularly in the western half of the region over here. And as this system moves into the northeastern part of the Gulf right here and then moves deeper into the area as well, that's going to kind of allow for it to be in a more moist environment. So ultimately, it does look like the dry air is not going to be an issue with this. And I want to check the wind shear a little bit later. In fact, I'll check the wind shear in just a second to kind of see, okay, we're looking at these conditions right here. what's going to potentially hold this back. I also think there's a probability that the system kind of may get in its own way. It's maybe a bit too broad for development, especially if it's going to be the next day or so. So we'll have to pay attention to that as well. We'll go ahead and take a quick look at the wind shear, and then we'll extrapolate from there. So here's your wind shear potential as we move into the Western Atlantic right here. We're going to go ahead and go to 200 to 850 millibar wind shear right here. So what we have right here, yeah, you have a pretty strong wind shear, at least at this current point. This is the observed from 0Z last night right here. You do have this wind shear that kind of moves and starts to slowly get away, but you do have also some wind shear to the southeast as well that may be hindering this. So you're going to want to pay attention to that. Yeah, I think wind shear is going to be the main thing that inhibits this. And you're looking at 50 plus knots of wind shear, especially to its southwest of it. Sorry, not southwest, the southeast of it. So that's something you're going to want to watch as well. Moisture is not an issue. It's mainly the wind shear I have a problem with, and the proximity to land, because there is some uncertainty with that. But by and large, I will say that this does have a decent shot of development if it stays over water. Just the main issue is the wind shear, and I want to look at those values. I want to look at how far away they are, how close the big shear is, and see how this goes from there from that point. So that's kind of what I'm thinking at this current point. Then as time continues to go on, wind shear starts to decrease more in the Gulf, and we'll talk more about that a little bit later. But ultimately, the main picture I am looking at with this area of interest, potentially an invest, we're not sure from the NHC just yet, is yes, there is a probability of development. I'm not dismissing that. But what I'm looking at with this is it's not particularly in the best conditions. And while I won't rule out any potential development, if it does, it's going to be relatively weak, maybe like a weak tropical storm at most. So that's kind of what I'm thinking with this area of interest. Unless something unexpectedly changes, the wind shear unexpectedly collapses, that is where I am holding at this current point in time. Now moving on, we're going to go ahead and show you some other conditions, and we're going to be talking about a few other things that we need to start discussing, particularly as it tones to the MDR and hurricane season, starting with the intertropical convergence zone. So here's what we got right here. This is the latest map that they have pulled up. Charlie actually sent this to me on Storms United. So this is the latest map that we have right here from the current and previous positions of the intertropical front in Africa right here. That's kind of your boundary. That kind of is your ITCZ over land, pretty much, if that makes sense. So that's kind of what we're doing. So from the previous 10 days, the shift has continued to move further and further up to the north. The biggest shift up to the north has actually been in Western Africa as the systems start to get closer to the Atlantic. That is a very concerning thing for me to look at right there, because if you're noticing all this before, it's mainly fluctuations, and yes, there is some northward movement, but then there's a little bit of southward, there's some deviation, but the biggest and most obvious movement right here from below average to above average is on the western part of Africa right there. And that is very concerning, because as those tropical waves come off the coast and they continue to move and head towards Africa, head off into the Atlantic Ocean right there. Ultimately, what that does is that it allows for the positioning of these waves to move further and further up to the north, and in better areas for tropical development, and in better areas to help mix out a lot of the Sahara dust that's still in there. So that's the kind of the first thing I'm looking at, and that's the first thing I am paying attention to with this right here. And I also have another map I'm going to go ahead and pull up that Charlie sent me. It's not really a map, it's a graph, but we can go ahead and take a quick look at this. So here's what we have right here. This is the mean western portion of the intertropical front right here. It was around below average for much of April, much of May, and then June. Then it got to average, then dipped below. Then in July, we saw it really start to turn up. We went from below average to spiking to around average, then spiking to above average at that current point. So we're going to have to watch to see how this evolves. And if this continues to, this shift continues and this trend continues as it shifts above average, what that's going to tell me is two things. One, you're going to notice the tropical waves are going to be further up to the north. Two, the tropical waves that do come off Africa are only going to get stronger and stronger, as this also indicates a stronger monsoon season as well. And the reason I highlight all of this stuff, even though it doesn't really affect the Caribbean in the immediate future is because when those waves do come off, that kind of starts the tropical development possibilities right there. Once they come off and enter off of Africa and enter the Atlantic, at that point, anything can happen in terms of tropical development. That's why I'm watching this. That's why I'm concerned about this, and that's why you should be concerned about it as well. But you should also be concerned about the water temperatures, the OHC, and the wind shear that's going to be moving through as well. We'll talk about all of that right now. So we'll start with the sea surface temperatures at this current point in time. So taking a quick look at this, the latest update, yeah, the Gulf is really starting to warm up once again. You're noticing more areas of 30 degrees Celsius that's kind of starting to pop up near the Bay of Campeche and the Western Gulf over here. Similar to the loop current, you're noticing more and more of those water temperatures starting to turn up. And you're noticing this 30 degrees Celsius area is really starting to consolidate in the more to the north in the Gulf Stream, as well as parts of the Bahamas around Nassau, around the Grand Bahama, around Great Abaco as well. And you're also watching the northwestern Caribbean too, where you're seeing those waters only getting deeper and deeper and deeper as back. And the cold wake that we were noticing earlier has continued to retreat back towards South America, and it's being replaced with 28 and 29 degrees Celsius waters. We're noticing a bit of an increase especially in the eastern half of the Caribbean right here, where we're now seeing a pretty big area of 29 degrees Celsius waters west of the Lesser Antilles and in parts of the Lesser Antilles as well, like southwest of Barbados, Trinidad, Tobago, the St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Grenada, those areas as well. So that's something to keep a very close eye on as well. The northwestern Atlantic, or the Atlantic Basin right here, it's starting to cool off a little bit in some areas, but a lot of this warm water is shifting further to the south, and that is pretty concerning to me as well. Shifting over to the ocean heat content, this is the big kahuna that I've been kind of looking at with this. The big kahuna of ocean heat content right here is you're noticing more and more of this OHC really starting to blow up and really starting to turn up across much of the Caribbean, across the Gulf, and in a lot of the eastern parts of the Caribbean and in the Atlantic Basin. The western part of the Atlantic Ocean is really blowing up with its OHC content. And basically, for those of you who do not know what OHC is, essentially it's how hot the water is and how deep down it ultimately goes. If you see higher OHC, that means you're looking at more warm waters that go deeper down. And I'll go ahead and show you this legend right here as I move my camera over just slightly just to show you this. Basically, what we're seeing here is we're seeing over 200 OHC along the loop current and in much of the Caribbean right here. I mean, it's a one big concentrated area, but still, it's pretty concerning to look at and pretty concerning to say the very least what's going on over there. So that's something to pay attention to as well. OHC is going to take time to recover in this cold wake over here in the Caribbean, but it's really turning up in the eastern Caribbean as you're getting warmer and warmer waters. Also seeing an increase in parts of the MDR, shifting further up to the north as well. The setup to me with the OHC looks to me that it's going to be, at least in terms of your best development, it's going to be further to the west and away from the Africa, which for at least the longevity, long-term development of tropical cyclones is going to be a very big positive for it, but it's also going to be a very big negative for those that may get affected in the Caribbean, in the Lesser Antilles, in the Greater Antilles, and potentially all the way up to the Gulf Coast and the United States. So good for the hurricanes, bad for everyone else. So that's what you have with your waters and your OHC. Looking at wind shear once again, we'll go ahead and zoom out to the entire Atlantic just to show you what's going on with that. And starting with this right here, I kind of show you the western part of the Caribbean. We'll go ahead and zoom back, not zoom back, but go back a little bit just to show you kind of what's going on. What you're noticing right here is you do have low wind shear across much of the main development region, but there are two areas I do want you to hone in on. And that is the Caribbean Sea over here and the Atlantic Basin, because those are going to see very fluctuative and very volatile increases and decreases in the in wind shear. Because you notice what you're starting to with right here in the Caribbean, it's really starting to fluctuate, really starting to increase and decrease quite a bit right here. You're going to want to pay attention to that, because what that ultimately is doing is Before, like in June and July in the Caribbean, especially the Eastern Caribbean, it's known as the dead zone for tropical cyclones. That dead zone is weakening considerably at this current point. And as we get into early August right here, this is July 30th actually. At this point, this is the first time all season where we have seen wind shear across much of the Caribbean collapse. That is a huge concern for me. And as time continues to go on, it really doesn't, it's not one of those things where it lasts like a few hours. No, it lasts about 36 hours or so before the shear does start to return a little bit. But even then, it's not at full strength. And it doesn't get to full strength again until around 15 days out. But even then, I still have skepticism about that as well. So you're going to want to pay attention to that. I also want to go ahead and show the trade winds as well, because I did talk to my guys at Storms United and they wanted to get their thoughts about that. So let's go ahead and take a quick look at this. So this is what they have out for today. So it has definitely changed compared to what we saw yesterday. But what you're noticing right here is you're noticing, at least to some of the guys I've talked to in Storms United, is essentially the reds are better for warming, better for water temperatures to warm up. The purples are better for tropical development. The purples indicate weaker winds, and the purples indicate weaker areas of shear as well. So that's kind of what I was kind of mixed up a little bit about. It's been, I know I kind of been going back and forth with that, but essentially the reds are good for water temperature heating, and the purple is good for is good for less shear. So now that I've clarified all of that, it took a little bit of back and forth for me to do that. I do apologize for that, but what you're noticing right here is you're noticing this shift right here, especially starting around like 264 hours out. It is still too early to indicate what's going on, but you're noticing weaker trade winds, and you're noticing a better environment for tropical development, at least in that aspect compared to what we saw previously. It's not nearly as egregious as what we saw yesterday. It's pretty much where we saw a massive surge of this throughout the entire time right here, but it is still present. And while it is more fluctuative, it is something to be concerned about, because when you see fluctuations like that, before it was like a lot of red and not very much purple. Now we're seeing more red and purple, red and purple, red and purple. That's something you're going to want to pay attention to, because if you see fluctuations like that, that means that the trade winds are collapsing at this current point, and they're going to start allowing for better tropical development, especially as we get into early August. And that could mean it could happen in the Caribbean. It could happen off the wave that we're noticing in the Gulf. It could happen off the Central American gyre. That's pretty typical as well. It could happen in the MDR. So you're going to really want to pay attention to that. Then we'll go ahead and show you the moisture component to kind of wrap this up in a nice little bow, as well as the precipitable water. Looking at moisture, yeah, tropical development really starts to increase. Not tropical development, but moisture really starts to increase across much of the MDR as more waves start to push through. Yes, there is some dry air that's going to be getting involved with that, and that's going to push some more Sahara dust into the Caribbean Sea just temporarily. But you're noticing the moisture gets stronger and stronger, and more of the Sahara dust starts to get pushed up to Europe, and that at least temporarily. And then the winds start to shift a bit more to get more dry air, at least in the subtropics. But what you're seeing right here is a combination of a further to the north ITCZ, or at least intertropical front in Africa, stronger tropical waves, less wind shear, increasing warming water, is allowing for a better environment and a more favorable environment for development at this current point than even what we could say last year. And taking a quick look at the precipitable water anomalies, those reflect that. There's more moisture for these systems to work with. Now, I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, that means a development is going to happen. We're going to see a Cat 5 megacane from this. No, what I'm saying here is we're looking at better conditions, and these waves that come off the coast of Africa have more moisture and better conditions to work with. And that's what I'm trying to say, and that's kind of what I've been emphasizing the last few weeks here. I would say once we get into peak hurricane season, you're going to go boom, 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 and then from then here we go. Around the time that that's going to happen, I would say is I would say we're going to start seeing better tropical developments like this week and early August. And then when we start seeing the explosive stuff is going to be between mid to late August. And that's kind of where I'm at right now. We'll keep you updated on that here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. But with that being said, we're going to go ahead and close the video out right here. I really hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are new. The goal, as always, is to get more people engaged with weather. If you want to help out, hang out, or ask us some questions, be sure to join the Storms United Discord server. The link to that is in the end screen. That being said, have a wonderful day, guys. Stay safe.